Everything worthwhile in life will be uphill. A better marriage, a purposeful career, being intentional at home, having an impact in the community. None of it happens by accident, and none of it happens on a flat, effortless path. But here's the problem. Most of us are exhausted. We're tired of drifting. We're tired of feeling overwhelmed. And so we look for an escape. We choose to numb by scrolling, or the passivity of just getting by, or putting off what we know we should do for the long run, but for something that feels nice in the moment. Well, welcome to the Worthwhile Climb series. Over the next few weeks, we are stopping the slide. We're stopping drifting. We're going to give it up. And we're going to trade the easy escape for the hard, worthwhile work of significance. But we aren't doing it with giant leaps that lead to burnout. We're doing it with consistent small steps, just a tiny 1% change, that will raise the lid on our leadership and ultimately our legacies. It's time to stop drifting. It's time to start climbing. It's time for you to claim your day. This is the Claim Your Day podcast. I'm your host, Nick Mazey. If you're tired of drifting and ready to start living intentionally according to your values, you're in the right place, my friend. We're here to help you lead with excellence at home, at work, and in your community so you can live with significance. Let's bridge the gap between who you are today and who you are called to be. Now is the time for you to claim your day. Hello, my friend, and welcome. Welcome to episode 82 of the Claim Your Day podcast. Right now, we're finishing up a series called The Worthwhile Climb. We've spent the last few weeks on this trail. We talked about the price tag, the Tuesday night battles, the leadership lid, and the slow burn. But you might be feeling a little bit tired, and as with all climbs, when you're working to improve, you're going to get tired. But I want to have you stop just for a second and turn around. Stop for a second and look at how far you've come. Look at the progress that you've made. Yes, there might be still a good way to go for what you want to achieve in the life you want to live, and just being intentional and living out your life according to your values. You're not supposed to have arrived, but you're supposed to continue to make progress and continue to climb and continue to improve in those areas and being more intentional. You're not the person that you were. You're not the person that you were. You're more intentional. You're more present. You're starting to see this everything worthwhile is uphill. It's not a threat. It's a promise. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing that everything worthwhile is uphill all the way. So today, it's our season or our series finale, and we're talking about the view from the top. We're shifting from that survival mode to significance, because the climb was never really just about you. It's not. We talk about the worthwhile things; they're not all about you. It's about the legacy that you're leaving, for everyone else. So as always, I have just a few points we're going to hit today. The first one, I want you to think about this as kind of like, mission over management. Most people spend their lives, managing their days, their calendar, their email, their schedule, managing time. But people that focus on significance, see, they lead their mission. See, if you're just managing your time, you're pretty much a glorified secretary for your own chaos. Think about that for a second. But significance, see, it happens when your daily small steps are connected to your big why. When you can see that connection, when you live out that connection between those small steps you're taking, those small steps are going to take you farther than those large leaps. But at the same time, those small steps, see, they need to be connected with your big why, your core values, what your purpose for this life. So you aren't just, working out or working late. You're building your health for your family. You're developing the resources to serve your family and the community for the next 40 years. When you shift these, small steps to really seeing that big why, that impact that they're going to have, it adds meaning. It adds significance to it. So that's that first point. I want you to start thinking about, mission instead of management. And then the next point is, all about just this view It's better with other people. We've touched on this a few times about not just bulldozing right through people to achieve your goals, but the view from the top, it is better with people. The greatest summit, the greatest view of the summit, it isn't necessarily the scenery. It's looking over at your spouse and your kids that are standing there with you. Because you chose the slow build instead of plowing right through them. You chose to climb that mountain in a way that encourages them to join in, that they can see it, that you're not just running ahead alone. When you raise your lid, see, you're giving others permission to raise theirs too. So in your growth, even your growth at work, it helps make your team better. Your growth isn't trying to charge ahead and ignoring everybody else. Not whatsoever. Instead, your growth is giving them permission to grow too, because you're serving through that leadership that you're growing in. Your growth at home, it makes your kids better. It makes them braver. It makes them willing to step out and to be a little vulnerable to pursue their goals and to really claim what they are. So your significance, it's not measured by what you achieve. Your significance is measured by how many people are better off because you chose that uphill path. Your significance is measured by how many people are better off by the choices that you made, the climb that you climbed, and the growth that you've had. You're impacting those lives. So the view is better with people. The third point is really just never return to that flat path. Never return. You've been on this uphill climb, and that is awesome, my friend. Never return to not climbing. The temptation after a win is to head back to that comfortable middle. Like, hey, you've earned it. You deserve your break. Now you're just going to coast on that previous achievement. Don't do it. Don't do it, my friend. You don't go for the comfortable and just mediocrity. The air is better up at the top of the mountain, my friend. So once you set on that next horizon, you can start to make progress toward that and begin to climb again. It is worthwhile. Now that you've raised your lid, now that you've improved, you've grown, you've been intentional with your actions. Now that you've done these things, what's your next mountain? What's your next mountain? How are you going to continue to grow and improve? I think back on when John Maxwell used to talk about how when he was focused on success, he would always ask himself, how long until I get there? Like, how long until I achieve? As though after that, he's just going to stop and he's going to coast on that success. But then when he started to focus on growth, instead of how long is it going to take, he really started to focus on how far can I go? And I want you to think about that while I'm saying, set your sights on the next horizon. It's not that you have to just go from achievement to achievement, but it's that continued growth and improvement through intentional actions in your life that's going to lead you to really surprise yourself at how far you can go, how much you can grow and improve, how many lives can you impact, how well can you lead your family and lead at work, and the ripples that go far beyond your life. The ripples of those actions and that growth and that impact are going to go far beyond your life. How far can they go? Well, I don't know. But I bet you it can surprise anybody else, the impact that you're able to have when you continue to grow and improve. Not settling for just coasting after you climb one mountain. Write down the person whose life has been positively impacted by your growth, by your significance of speaking into their lives. Who's that person that has been positively impacted? Hey, send them a text message and encourage them. Tell them you're committed to climbing with them, for them. Tell them what you're working on that might be able to help them too. Continue that impact, because that's the significance that you're having when you are continuing to grow and improve. When you don't quit on that worthwhile uphill climb, you're impacting lives that really need to see what you're doing for their own encouragement. I'm sure that there's people that you follow that give you some encouragement, that help you to want to strive and improve and be better. Well, there's people looking to you too. You're that person for somebody else. So don't give up on your growth. That's the main teaching points or talking points for this episode. It's all about, putting that mission over just management, seeing that vision, and then your big why. Connecting your small steps to that. And also the view is better with others. Do that slow build, work in a way that you're not bulldozing through people, that you're encouraging them to come along. That's going to be not just the significance, but it's going to be the enjoyment too. Once you make these worthwhile climbs, once you make this progress and you see that growth, never return to that flat path. Keep on growing. All right. Like if you've enjoyed this series, I want to encourage you to go to nickmazy.com. You can check out get the intentional choice guide there and come join the conversation on Substack. It's a great platform where there's a lot of negativity on a lot of social media stuff, but there's a lot of quality writers on there, and there's a lot of good conversation. So find me there. And once again, here in just the next little bit, I'm gonna have some more official announcements for the community I'm developing on school. Still putting the pieces together, but it's going to be there to help you live more intentionally. It's going to help really be focused on the family values professionals, being intentional to stop drifting and start living according to their values, and growing and improving, themselves with that intentional leadership component. We got to be intentional. We got to lead others. And a lot of times that starts with leading that person in the mirror. We got to lead according to our values, your values, and what makes most sense for you and your life and your family. All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Claim Your Day podcast. As always, I'm glad that you're here and joining in. Now, remember, the climb is worthwhile because you are worthwhile. Your family is worthwhile. Your mission is worthwhile. Now, thank you for climbing with me. Now, go claim your day, my friend.